Hello and welcome to this week's Training Services Tech Tip video focusing around font accessibility. We're still using, for reference, the Web Accessibility in Mind or WebAIM website for this. So we're going to start off with a list of some recommended principles when it comes to working with fonts. So the first one, as you can see, is already here. It's very visible because it's showing a lot of different types of fonts. And with a list of anywhere between 200,000 to 300,000 fonts available out there, which font is the best is still up for a debate. We have those that favor serif style fonts, and I'll give you an example of what a serif style font looks like that is better used for print. And we also have the sans serif, sans coming from the French without, that is preferable for screen reading applications. They are making the serif fonts a little bit easier to read with screen readers, but for accessibility and compliance, sans serif, which you'll see a couple of examples right now, is preferred. So the first principle is to obviously use simple, familiar, and easily parsed fonts. Some of the available fonts listed out there through applications like Word, Publisher, PowerPoint, and so on, they may look flashy, maybe even trendy and tempting for you to use, but because of accessibility principles, we must make sure that the fonts that we use will be picked up, or read, I should say, through screen reader applications. So that's the first one. Common sans serif font that is used a lot right now is Calibri. Another one is Arial, and there's a couple along the lines of this style font, the sans serif font, that are pretty popular. So first one is to use simple, familiar, and easily parsed fonts. For the second principle, I'm actually going to zoom in so that it's easier to read the text. I'll probably zoom in just to make this a little bit wider. And the second principle is to avoid character complexity. We have in that list of 200 to 300,000 fonts, fonts that are cursive, that are script, that might have something other than just a regular block print look. So avoiding character complexity, as the first paragraph is listed there in cursive, is also recommended. Even though the line next to that or below that is with the Times New Roman font, as you can see, it is easier and simpler to read, but because it is using the serif style of font, it is not practical for accessibility purposes. So principle number 2 is avoid character complexity. For the third principle is to avoid character ambiguity. Yes, it is pretty easy to tell whether that is a C or an O, even though these are two different types of fonts. But when you look at the E versus the O, and again, we're using serif and sans serif fonts for this particular example, it does, or it can get a little harder. And if you thought that was pretty easy, look at the next one down, right? We have I versus L versus this other character that still looks like an L, but it's not. It's actually a 1. So that is why they're recommending to avoid character ambiguity. When you are using serif style fonts, you get the extra little terminations at the end of a stroke when you're writing a letter, versus with a sans serif, it's literally just the main stroke that makes up an A. So an A would be comprised of 3 strokes. Principle number 4 is to use a limited number of typefaces, fonts, and font variations. As you can see here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different font faces. They also have variations, as even though they're lowercase, they're uppercase letters. And some of these extend beyond the traditional or normal height of a font. So making sure that we use a limited number of typefaces, fonts, and font variations would be principle number 4. For principle number 5, we have another doozy because it is considering spacing and weight. We are able to modify the spacing between characters, and as you can see from this first example, that could be read in one of two ways, cod or cool. So which one is it? Which one were you trying to say? Screen readers, fortunately, are able to pick up whether it is one or the other, because as you are typing, every keystroke is registered, so it would identify the letter. But when you're reading this through someone's eyes, it can create that confusion, which could lead to problems. And if you thought spacing was important, yes, guess what? So does weight. If you look at this next example below, the contrast between the first and the second line of text, the first one is very thin or very lightweight. It's the, think of it as like how hard you push down on a pen, right, when you're writing, versus the next one down, which almost looks like it was bold, or maybe a felt pen was used versus a ball pen. So consideration number 5, or principle number 5, is to consider spacing and weight. Principle number 6 has to do with contrast. We already know what contrast means in images. We also know what contrast means with text. It's making sure that the background where the text is written is distinguishable by a factor of 4.5 to 1. So if you notice, between these 3 lines, the first one is too little contrast, can make things difficult to read. Too much contrast could create problems, most of the time making it look like if it's bold. And sometimes we may not necessarily want to show something as bold, but too much contrast would obviously lead to a problem like that. So the ideal is to ensure adequate but not too much contrast. So that is principle number 6. And the last principle that we're going to share with all of you via the AIMS website is to avoid small font sizes and other anti-patterns. So obviously small text isn't just hard to read on paper, it is also hard to read on screens, unless you're granted the opportunity to zoom in. But if you have something that is, obviously you can zoom, but maybe it's not readable text by the application, then you could run into problems where the blown up text is pixelated, granular, and then it still makes it hard to read. Large sections of bold text can introduce difficulties because you are emphasizing a large paragraph or a large section of text when it is not meant to do so. So can italicized text, and we definitely need to be cautious, or if possible, avoid using all caps, because we all know from netiquette that all caps means we are yelling. So we definitely don't want to do that. Now for this last part, I actually want to show you a compare-contrast example of what it means to work with serif fonts versus sans serif fonts. And if you recognize this paragraph, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. If you've ever installed a font on your computer, this is that sample text that you get. But I did want to show you what a screen reader application does. Because again, something that's cursive or a script style font, which is considered a serif font, may be confusing, especially if we're not using a screen reader application. So I actually wanted to showcase what the screen reader application outputs as far as what it sees and what it reads out to someone using a screen reader. All right, so NVDA just loaded on my computer, and if you notice, just
loading NVDA.
Switching over
Please
to the application.
Copy, show hidden icons.
It starts reading what I am clicking on, in this case, the word application. If I hover over the
Document
text
1, Word,
and click.
Document print layout page 7 section 1 page break. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, baguette script. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, aptus, selected. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, Times New Roman, the new
So fortunately, the NVDA application that I'm using to output what the application is seeing and is reading out to the user caught all 4 of these examples perfectly. But again, that's because this is readable text. when we have text that is too small, or maybe not necessarily readable text. Screen readers have not just the difficulty of not being able to read an image that contains text, but also image that might be too small or that might be unclear because of the cursive effect or the brush style script effect that it has as the character ends. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more. Take care. Bye-bye.